and conscious speech represses the articulation of the complex. So for both, the dynamic core of representation is absent in dominant practice and in the prevalent forms of representation. Thirdly, both conceive of this dynamic core of representation as being mediated through human practice and history. Marx's materialism is interested in human labor. Therefore, it never explicitly deals with crude matter as such, but rather with forms of interaction between human agents and historical material, emphasizing the historicity of human needs and of nature. Freud describes the unconscious as a subsymbolic material remnant into which the history of the individual is inscribed. The ontological grounding of Marx and Freud therefore appears to be a limit concept of symbolic representation and not simply crude matter. The productive ground of symbolic representation is therefore not merely an object, an entity, or a thing. Instead, it is a relation between human practice on the one hand and corporeal and natural materiality on the other. And this relation is fourthly an all-embracing structure. Freud's complex and Marx's socio-economic foundation converge here. They both describe a dynamic relation. The productive ground is a materially and practically concrete totalizing structure. All the readings of Marx and Freud inspired by structuralism have, for better or worse, pointed out these analogies and their ontologies. As far as I know, they have, however, neglected the methodological hints that hide in the term association. For in both theories, association serves as a means to articulate and to organize this ontological ground for therapeutic ends. My claim is, thus, that for a proper understanding of the relations between Marx and Freud, the analogies in ontology have to be seen in context with the analogies in a method that I would now like to reconstruct as an aesthetically inspired method, association. Whether in the history of association psychology or of political associationism, association is a free form of coordination. In Marxism and psychoanalysis, it mediates between the bearers of primary ontological energies. This idea can be called aesthetic in several respects. Firstly, it aims to mediate materiality in symbolic practice. The association of workers in Marxist terminology avoids the flaws of the bourgeois state and brings economic production and political organization together. Free association in Freudian psychoanalysis tries to reconstruct the structure and the logics of the complex as it is connected with bodily impulses. And it is this connection that is, according to Freud, normally repressed by articulated speech. Association is, furthermore, driven by the assumption that the bearers of material forces, material producers, spontaneous utterances, are intrinsically connected and can establish a non-hierarchical pattern, a network structure, that reveals the connectivity that had already secretly, latently been present. Some tendencies towards the formation of such patterns can, as both Marx and Freud point out, already be found in the present order. Marx and Engels emphasized in the Communist Manifesto that with the bourgeois order, a relation between the laborers emerges as its imminent product, something that is already latently present. The advance of industry, they write, I quote, whose involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the laborers due to competition by the revolutionary combination due to association. Association is thus a form of rationality that follows a different logic of expression and of organization. It maintains its own presence in the given order underneath and in struggle with the dominant rationality. And, as Freud argues in his studies on hysteria, even presents its own correct and proper order. He stresses, I quote, that the pathogenic psychical material, which has ostensibly been forgotten, which is not at the ego's disposal, and which plays no part in association and memory, nevertheless in some fashion lies ready to hand in correct and proper order. It is only a question of removing the resistances that bar the way to the material. Association is organized along the lines of intrinsic connections and as a field of sub-symbolic energies. Here the concept of association becomes aesthetically interesting. For it is not only that association has, ever since its further development in Scottish Enlightenment, been an aesthetic concept. It it has an aesthetic structure too. Association is a pattern that connects expressive impulses and is resistant against the conventional systems of representation. With this structure of an open differentiality and of a potentially infinite chain of association, Marx and Freud employ structures of aesthetic rationality. No wonder that in the interpretation of dreams, Freud also calls free association, reminiscent of Kantian terminology, at least twice as free play. Of course, not that either Marx or Freud would develop an aesthetic theory, and I'm not claiming that, but both find in association an aesthetically inspired method that therapeutically supplements their ontology. According to both Marx and Freud, association is resistant to repressive forms of representation. Censorship and the functions of the superego take the place in Freud's theory that institutionalized ideology occupies in Marx. In association, a reality is expressed that was structurally denied. It thus replaces the fixed order of meaning in which certain connections are made impossible. It replaces them with an open field structure of immanent references. Freedom of association was consequently one of the key demands of the early working class movement. And this politics articulates what state and capital institutionally deny. As Marx had outlined, the fetishism of the commodity precisely represses the acknowledgement of human labor. And the bourgeois state, grounded on the idea of universal citoyenneté and on the idea of constitutional law, abstracts from its concrete origin in historically specific relations of production. Marx quite regularly uses the term association when he emphasizes the libertarian and anti-statist aim of the socialist movement. Association articulates a form of politics that cannot be alienated. In the poverty of philosophy, I'm not misery of philosophy, as I said earlier, Marx writes, the working class, in the course of its development, will substitute for the old civil society an association which will exclude classes and their antagonism. And there will be no more political power properly so called. Freud, of course, might not have agreed with such utopian claims and with the idea that association might simply replace the given orders of articulated speech and of symbolic representation. He stresses, however, that free association is in constant struggle with the tendencies of censorship implicit in the conventional discourse. The analyst's task is, as Freud writes in the interpretation of dreams, to find, I quote, a legitimate and deeper link between associations which is subjected to the resistance of the censorship. End of it. So for both, association follows a libertarian impulse. It is indeed free association. When I speak of method, I obviously call on a terminology that makes a lot more sense in the context of psychoanalysis than in the context of Marxism. Freud has, of course, reflected extensively on the fundamental rule of psychoanalysis and its implicit ethos. In the case of Marxism, it might be doubtful whether association can be described as a method at all. Even more doubtful whether it would have a therapeutic function. There are, however, some structural problems about how to employ and how to facilitate free association that Marxism and psychoanalysis are both confronted with. And against their backdrop, association does in fact appear to be a therapeutic method in Marxism too. Freud invests a lot of efforts on these questions. As the analyst is fully dependent on the associations of the patient, she very often would have to trigger associations to break the resistance against associations. Especially in the case of hysteria, such resistance is pronounced. The analyst does, to a certain extent, have to act on behalf of the associations. But that puts her in a dilemmatic position, as associations must not become projections of the analyst. In this tension between the autonomy of associations and the mentoring of the analyst, of spontaneity and directedness, Freud is strongly trustful in any form of association. As he writes in his studies on hysteria, I quote, every single reminiscence which emerges during an analysis of this kind has significance. An intrusion of irrelevant mnemic images in fact never occurs.